Hello everyone and welcome back to the How to Play Starcraft 2 Unit Guide. In this series we'll be continuing with the first meeting of a female Protoss, the Adept. Now let's talk a little bit about the lore of the Adept, which honestly isn't that deep. Now the, the developmental lore was that this is a fairly new unit. She was only added in the Legacy of the Void expansion in about 2000, no, 2017, and has only been around for the last few years, in fact, whereas the game's been around since 2010. The in-universe lore is more or less that Artanis wanted more warriors, with a focus on speed rather than armor, which is why she has less shields and less health than her zealot brothers. So where do we get an adept from? Okay, so adepts, like zealots and stalkers, are produced from gateways and warp gates. So we're just going to do that example real quick. So first thing, of course, is a pylon followed by a gateway. Again, normally in the game you will not be able to get a adept straight away. However, after the cyber core is done, you can then warp in adepts wherever you so please, as long as that there is a pylon field, or a power field rather. Now, if we're talking about the upgrades for the adept, you can get it from two places. There is the standard forge. So adept is a ground unit, so she benefits from upgrades from the forge. For example, if I click, right now it's 000, but if I upgrade +1/+1, she will get these upgrades accordingly. The other place you can get the upgrades, similar to most of her gateway comrades, are from the Twilight Council, where you can get an upgrade called Resonating Glaives. That was a mouthful. She is ultimately a tier 1.5 unit, as you can get it almost straight away, but you still need to get another structure before you do that. So let's talk about those abilities, and here it gets a little bit more complicated because you do have two sets of abilities. Now the first is psionic transfer. So let's just clear the board and get a single adept and a marine. Okay, so the thing about the Adept is that it's a harassment unit. The first ability she has by default is psionic transfer. Logs, or more oftenly called in the community, shade. So let's demonstrate what it does. So if I go to the other side of the field, I press F and I fire. You can see on the minimap. The Adept will fire it's called a shade, and it can go wherever it pleases. Now, the thing about the shade is that it cannot attack, which is why it did not attack this marine. But the shade also cannot be attacked. So let's do that again. Okay. You can also control where the shade goes. And as you can see, the shade can go pretty far. It went all the way from there to here in one go. In most StarCraft 2 maps in the current meta, it would take about 1 to 2 shades done perfectly to get from natural to natural. And it is really good for scouting, which we will get back to later. Now, the other thing important about the shade is that you can cancel a shade. So let's say you want to go to this square, but you decide, nah, you can cancel it. And the Adept does not, well, psionically transfer there. However, it is important to note that the cooldown does not reset upon a cancellation. The cooldown just continues as if the shade had finished, which is quite important if you're trying to plan, your movements. The other important thing about the shade, for now at least, is that after a shade is done, it takes exactly 3 seconds before you can shade again, which is quite important. Not including, how long it actually takes to teleport to the shade. As you notice, both sides can move as much as you can micro. So that's the first ability psionic transfer, aka shade. Now the next ability is a upgrade you get at the aforementioned Twilight Council called Resonating Glaives. What that means is that, let's just switch this on. What that means is that the Adept will fire 45% faster. AKA you have, okay, there's too many Adepts. You don't want Marines. What this means is that the Adept's DPS goes up quite a bit. Not via its attack, but rather its attack speed. So to demonstrate that ability, let's just have two groups of Adepts and let them go at it. Now logic dictates that without the upgrade it should be even, however, yeah, these Adepts are making quick work of those Adepts. Now the other important thing to note about Resonating Glaives is that you can actually see when it's been upgraded, because these Adepts are firing in the blue, these Adepts are firing in these orange orbs, so you know when your enemy has gotten Resonating Glaives. Red will win this battle every single time without fail. Okay, let's clear it. Let's switch off the upgrades. Okay, so those are the abilities. Now let's talk about the strength of the Adept. Now the first one obviously is speed and scouting. I mean, you can get an Adept fairly quickly out in early game, and this Adept is then very, very useful for, you know, going around the map, looking for proxies, figuring out what's where. In addition to that, you can also use Resonating Glaive as a direct scout. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take this example. Let's say there's an enemy base, and there's some Marines. Now, because you have vision of your own shade, you can shade forward and see, okay, there are 4, okay, there's a base here, cancel. Okay, I know now, as a Protoss player, that there are 4 Marines, which an Adept cannot take on, and there's also a command center. This is what I mean by it's very good in these scouting situations. Now, the next strength it has is that it does extra damage versus light. Okay, so what that means is that, let's clear the board. Let's have a Marine and a couple of Zerglings. In fact, let's have 2 Marines. Now, both the Marine and the Zergling are light units. Both just so happens to be light and biological. So, Adepts are fairly strong against them. Yep, a few shots is cutting down that Marine, and it's going to cut down this Marine too. Okay, never mind the Zerglings, we'll do a dedicated Zergling. Now, Adepts against Zerglings are a slightly tougher proposition, because if you just let an Adept go up against 4 Zerglings, which is the equivalent of minerals, the Adept will get eaten for her. However, even without the shade, it's possible to just micro. You can really shade if we needed to. But just by doing this, there, the Adept will survive. And it's able to effectively shred through most light units. So it's pretty good in the early game as a result. And the last ability is intense battle flexibility. Now we're going to have to go to a little bit more interesting scenario for this one. Okay, so let's go to something that happens pretty often. Okay, let's say we have an actual base.
Yes, sir.
And let's say, the third player decides to set up some defenses. It's prudent. Let's have some SCVs and submarines. Protoss, let's do Adepts. Okay, so SCVs are mining.
Who wants some? This better be good.
Where's that? The bunker.
Armed and ready.
Okay, so let's say you as the, in this case, Protoss player, you want to get it, you want to do some damage. You got to, okay. We're getting shot at. The Adepts cannot take out this bunker. What you can do, however, is shade. So it just bypasses all of this, goes straight into the middle line, and it's gonna wreak havoc. Okay, let's say that the Marines finally realize something's going on. The Adepts can just shade out. In fact, if you really want, you can shade back in. And then, okay, the idea was to try and shade out, but you still managed to do a lot of damage to these SCVs and to some of these Marines. Another tactical advantage you have with shade. Okay, let's go back to the. Oops, let's go back to the field. Clear the board. Another thing you could do with shade is this. Now, this is a risky thing in and of itself. Okay, normally in a battle, let's say, no, it's a bad example. Let's say you have 10 Adepts against 10 Stalkers, roughly same. And you just attack. You will see that the Stalkers will win this fight. Easily. Stalkers just have higher DPS than the Adepts. It's not entirely a fair fight, the Stalkers had more supply, but okay, so there are 8 units remaining. However, this happens in Protoss vs Protoss. If you choose to shade on top of your enemies, so this allows the Adepts to get a lot more surface area than they normally would, allowing them to do a little bit more damage than they would do if you just A-move. Now, this is a tricky one because this only works in pretty specific scenarios and will not work all the time.
I am the voice of the eclipse.
So another good example where this is useful is, let's clear the board. You have 5 Adepts and let's say 2 siege tanks. Now the siege tanks are automatically siege and the Adepts try to attack. Yeah, this happens. The tanks blast through the poor Adepts. However, if you shade directly on top of those tanks, the Adepts can shade all the way from there. Of course, this is also something about the siege tank, which it actually has a minimum range. We will get to a siege tank in the future video. But for now, you can clearly see that, with the shade ability, they're able to like destroy those tanks. Okay, now the battle flexibility also comes with its own weakness, which we will address in a quick second in the weaknesses section. So some of the weaknesses of the Adept is it's actually pretty bad against armor. Now what I mean by this? Well, it's one thing to go up against Marines. It's another thing to go up against Marauders. The Marauder, let's just send them to attack, is not a light unit, it's armored. So while they do 22 damage versus light, they only do 10 against armor. Whereas, well, the Marauders, as you can see, are doing 10 damage. Now, the Adept itself is also light biological, but the Marauders are winning. and they will win every single battle you set them up against. If you want a even more jarring example, apart from Stalkers,
Don't leave me hanging.
let's take Zerg. So 5 Adepts against 5 Roaches, how's it gonna go? Yeah, they're just not doing a lot of damage against anything that's armored. Again, the bonus damage comes up against light, which what makes them effective, but realistically their attack is kind of bad. So once the enemy techs up to roaches, to marauders, or even stalkers, adepts are weak against them. Now another weakness is that they're also very vulnerable to splash damage, as you saw with the siege tanks, because adepts tend to clump up. But let's take the Zerg and Terran example. So if this happens, again, for all the other units we will have videos of them in the future. Yep, just took out a bunch of them. Even more dangerous if, let's say, you shade forward, you don't really know what you're shading into, and you just so happen to shade perfectly on top of a bunch of bailings without microwing. Yeah, you lose all your adepts. In the Terran's case, they have Widow Mines, which cost less. So let's say both sides attack, and the Widow Mines choose to burrow. Okay, one Widow Mine goes down. Yep. Or, worse still, if let's say you shade forward, you don't have detection, you don't know these Widow Mines are here, you come here, you think there's nothing, and then this happens. Yeah, very vulnerable against splash damage. But however, the biggest single drawback of the Adept isn't its inability to shoot up. It's not its low health. It's that it falls off in value. It's weak in the late game. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's take a scenario as Terran. No, as Zerg. Let's say in the late game you want to go after this hatchery. Even if we take more adepts, such as 10, and we shade them over. There they are, they're flying over. By the way, if they're going up against a building, they'll just clump up against it. It takes a while for them to kill buildings. And this makes them effectively useless in the later game as a harassment unit, because, well, it just takes so long. By this time, realistically, reinforcements would be coming from other places and they'd all be dead. An actual better scenario, a better alternative, is you just get a bunch of zealots. Zealots do not cost gas. They do not. And they have a much higher DPS. Furthermore, the other thing you can guarantee about the Zealot is that you will almost always get charge. It's just a good upgrade. Even if you go for Glaives, you would almost get charge and blink after that. Whereas Glaives is kind of a maybe thing you get, and look how fast it takes it down with charge. It's actually possible to kill this hatchery before significant reinforcements get here. Even if you turn on Glaives for the Adepts, let's get those 10 Adepts back. Shade. Furthermore, once Zealots have charged, the shade doesn't really have that much value anymore. Yeah, the Zealots were still with charge, were still killing this a lot faster than what these Adepts are doing right now. Furthermore, because as the game goes, Also, because as the game goes on and on, most of the units that tend to come out later will be armored, massive. You don't tend to get a lot of light units later on. Let's get rid of this. Oh, oops. Okay, so let's say we take 5 Adepts against the Thor. You see, how this goes. Get rid of the Broodlings. Even with resonating glaives, the Thor is gonna beat the Adepts. With still decent amount of health. However, and this might surprise you, if you take just 5 Zealots on the other hand, and yes, they have charge, the Zealots are gonna shred through it. With quite a few to spare. Which makes the Adepts in comparison pretty useless. Because once you're in that part of the game that you have charge, the Adepts, the value just falls off. So, in conclusion, the Adept is a good unit early game because she has a lot of battlefield flexibility. It's a really good unit because it's got a lot of micro potential. So you can make it do really well. You can make her do really cool things. In addition to that, it's a relatively cheap unit. It can stand up to most of its of her counterparts, Marines, Zealots, it's counter to other Adepts, Sentries. But once the game goes on, and once you're past that phase of the game where the enemy has gotten higher tech units, more tanks, more Immortals, Roach Hydra, the Adept just can't match up to it, and you don't see them later into the game. But still, it's a good unit in the early game, and you will see it in almost every single matchup. So with that, I'm concluding this video about the Adept. If you like this video, please do subscribe, comment if you have any feedback, and stay tuned. We'll be going through in this series. I intend to go through every single unit. That's my Adept. There she is. To every single unit and structure of this game. So, like I mentioned, do subscribe to keep track of when I upload my next video. And thanks for watching.